Ownership. You know, laws of property and ownership are very strong here. If you own something, you can do an awful lot with it. And so they're trying to patent certain things and then own them. You know, patent genes, patent parts of life. And it's very scary. It's a problem. And it's going to take a lot of energy to fight against. But it's so repugnant to most people. So, you know, we'll just have to see how things play out. But I share your concerns.
Sort of on from that, do you, on a personal level, including the meat industry, including the vegetable and plant industry, do you feel that the big ag is just too big? I mean, the way I see it, there's sort of government, and then just above that is big farm, and then just above that is big ag, sort of pulling strings every way.
Yeah, big ag is very influential. Big ag is engaged in like insurance policies. It's involved in drug, pharmaceutical stuff. It's very influential. It is too big. I also am not for big plant ag. Like monocrop corn, monocrop potatoes, genetically modified organisms of all kinds. I think we need to move back to a more sensible, localized food system.
Could you grab
again, where you have
I have to charge this thing.
Local farmers
so
grow food and for a local market, and
tripod,
where there's
tripod.
more of a community that is created where
Can you grab the
people know
tripod
they're
for me?
getting their food and they feel good
Thank
about
you.
it, and farmers can talk about what they're doing and not have to hide it.
I didn't
and
think
people
this did
invite
very
people to
well.
visit the farm. So yeah, I think we need a whole different model.
Yeah, I didn't think I did.
We had a small speaker here last semester who gave sort of a bleaker outlook on this issue. But do you think that right now, with the amount of people in the world, that we are in any way sustainable through natural sort of farming methods? Or do you think he gave us an estimate that the Earth can only naturally sustain about, I think he gave away 2 million or 20 million people. But
Well, there's a lot of ways to look at that. But I think that the way we grow food is going to affect how sustainable it is. If we grow a lot of meat, we could not support this existing population on a diet like we eat here in the United States. So it's already unsustainable if we're going to eat the way we're eating here. And when you talk about acreage, in the United States we have about 130,000 acres of broccoli being grown. All the broccoli we get in this country is 130,000 acres. There are some beef operations that own that much land. So we need to shift things more in that direction. And if we do, it's just we can get a lot more food per acre. And not only growing food in farming areas and rural areas, but in urban areas. There are community gardens now popping up in Manhattan, in Brooklyn. People growing food on their windowsills, doing sprouts and things like this. So there is starting to be, and there's a food not lawns movement. And can you think of all the chemicals and all the resources that go into growing these lawns? And if that was instead put towards growing food, what we would start seeing? So it's a different kind of agriculture, very localized, where people are growing their own in many cases. Or trading with neighbors. I visited some folks out in California, and they were planting fruit trees, and they were talking to their neighbors who were planting other kinds of fruit trees, so that when they had all theirs come ripe and they have too many to eat, they could give them to their friends, and their friends had their other kind of fruit, they would give it to them. So there's these kinds of community-oriented food systems that are starting to develop. And I think they're very healthy, physically as well as socially and environmentally. And they make a lot of sense. So I do believe that we can feed the world with that kind of approach. I think it builds community and it builds healthy bodies and a healthy system, which is very different than what we have now.
Are you a marked man anywhere?
Am I a marked man anywhere? I don't know. I actually speak at a lot of industry conferences, believe it or not. So I go to these places and talk to these folks, and I'm happy to do that. I think it's important to have a discussion. We can have disagreements, but farm secretary has been targeted. Many of you have probably heard about the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act that passed a few years ago and basically labeled animal people as terrorists, which is kind of ridiculous. But the precursor to that was the Animal Enterprise Protection Act that passed in the 1990s, in the early 1990s. And as part of that, the Justice Department came up with 12 terrorist groups. And Farm Sanctuary, I'm proud to say, was on the list. We wrote them a letter and they took us off the list because it was completely ridiculous. But yeah, so there are some folks that aren't too crazy about what we're doing. And I can understand that because we are challenging certain assumptions, we are challenging certain mindsets, we are challenging a certain economic system that we believe is unreasonable and harmful and unnecessary. And so I can understand why people would feel not too happy sometimes at what we say. But at the end of the day, it's about, we don't want to bring anybody down. We want to prevent suffering. We want to promote healthy food systems. And I think that really brings us back to, again, growing plants, not animals. And I think it's better for all involved. Okay, I guess one more, or maybe two more questions, but we're getting close to, I think, 9 o'clock or so.
I love the idea of using localized systems to feed the world and feed populations. However, I don't think that it's physically possible for there to be enough land around the large cities of the United States to have a localized system. It's just not feasible to believe that the suburbs and the small rural areas around New York City can feed the entire city. It just won't work.
Well, it might not feed the whole city, but it could feed a fair bit, and then you get a little bit more from a little outside, you know. And so, yeah, there's rooftop gardens also in New York City, you know. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. But I think in the suburbs, there's a lot of land there that's in lawns now that could be in, you know, fruit trees or vegetable gardens. So, you know, we'll just have to see how it plays out. But I do believe that can happen. You don't. That's fine, just to see it a little differently. That's okay. Yeah, okay, last question.
If someone's currently consuming standard American diet and they want to work towards veganism or vegetarianism, what would you suggest as like the most powerful change they could make? You know, a lot of people eliminate beef first, but maybe there's more fat in the chicken. So we're going to eliminate a product.
Yeah, if you had to eliminate a product, I would probably say it should be dairy or eggs, believe it or not. Because those animals are pushed and live long lives, longer lives, more tortured lives, and at the end, they're also killed. So those are, I think, the cruelest products, eggs and milk, ironically. Because a lot of times people who care about animals stop eating flesh. And that's good. We encourage people to stop eating flesh, but I think dairy and meat, or dairy and eggs, rather, are some of the worst at this point. But anyway, I thank you all for staying around. We've been here a long time tonight. There's some books over here, and they usually sell for $15, but tonight we have they're $10 tonight because some generous supporters have purchased them, and they're available at a discounted rate. So, so I'll be over here to sign them if you're interested. But thank you all again for being here. Really appreciate it.